Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Film and Family, a podcast for filmmakers who want to see real progress in their film careers without sacrificing their health or relationships. Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Well, Kent's back.
I'm back and I'm breathing.
He's alive and well. And we're going to do a podcast. We're going to do a quick one today. We'll give you an update on the film. We'll share some thoughts we've been having and learning that are about the value of negative emotion. So
let's jump right in. So updates on the film. We are, weeks ago we told you that we had basically wrapped. And weeks later we are almost wrapped. So to explain, we slowed production way down. And our goal was, as we explained, I think in a previous episode, was to try and apply all of the things that we learned already to set. And that took a few tries. So a few days in, we tried to say, okay, we're going to figure this out. And we're like, well, this is still hard. Hard isn't bad, but I think it was unnecessarily hard and a little unorganized. So we shot again yesterday. Yesterday was maybe our third to last day, maybe, depending on how sunny it is going to be and cooperative we can get everything to be. And yesterday went really well. So I think we started to learn who needs to be on set, what positions are really important, what preparation we need personally to do before each shoot day. And I think we're starting to really get a sense of specific things this movie needs and the people on this movie need. And so,
yeah, right before wrap, we finally got it.
We got it. We figured it out. And we've also, I think, just learned a lot about ourselves. There's a huge side that's just emotional intelligence. I think often about what Alexander McKendrick said, being the plight of most young filmmakers is just that the work is what really crushes them. When they become used to the work and the toil of filmmaking, the tools and the techniques, and that can finally become second nature, then they can really engage in the creative side of it. They can really start to author their own work as opposed to just getting the job barely done, like a homework assignment, right? Yeah. It's not like anyone wants to read what you wrote when you turned it into your 10th grade English teacher. You just got it done. But then people who are publishing things as like PhD majors, they're actually not just making sentences that make sense grammatically. They're actually sharing deep thoughts that are really important. So
yeah, that happens on anything. I remember learning that with editing, feeling that way with writing. The screenplay format for a long time kind of held me back because I'm so not used to it. I read a lot growing up and I was used to a book format. And same thing with learning a language. At first, you're so focused on the semantics that you don't feel like you can really express yourself very well.
Yeah. So in that sense, I feel like we're learning an emotional intelligence with the work. Like we can bear the work more emotionally soundly. We're not, I feel like, getting stressed out about certain things. I think we're learning to take it slow. Our mantra on set has become, we stole this from a climber. This.
Emily and
well,
I'm probably messing up her name. She's a rock climber.
We should throw this into the show notes.
Well, it's actually not in her. It's not in the commercial that she says this. Yeah.
Anyway, she said, as a rock climber, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so that became our mantra on our film set. We said, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's okay if we're a little behind schedule. We just move forward. We don't lose our minds. We are patient with each other, especially the kids on set or equipment failures or location flubs or whatever random stuff happens. We just go, all right, yeah, let's just kind of slowly move through this obstacle or this thing and just stay patient with everything. And we've just started to kind of slowly build this set culture of chillness. And that's actually, I think, led to everyone feeling like we got what we needed. We got all the coverage we needed. We're thinking a little more level-headed and clearly, which I think is leading to an improvement of creativity and creative thought on set. It seems obvious, maybe. I guess if I'd listened to this before this movie, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds nice. Yeah, I want to do that. But you don't know who you are until you get there, until you get in the heat of all of it. And I think I've realized that there's a lot that I needed to learn just in terms of emotional intelligence on movie sets.
Yeah, well, circumstances reveal us to ourselves.
So I've learned that this is something I needed to learn, and I'm hopefully learning that thing. And so yesterday was one of the best days I've ever had on a set. And I think we started to kind of remember all the things that we learned years ago, as well as on this movie, and it's starting to come together, and the work is starting to become a little more second nature, and I'm really excited about that.
There's also just such a sense of camaraderie and friendship and fun, and that was really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's true. That was really enjoyable. So that's the update on the film and on the filmmakers, I suppose. Yeah, we wanted to talk about negative emotions. It's a joyful podcast.
Good emotions on set, but there is value to the negative emotions. So we wanted to talk about conflict and failure and things that we tend to avoid and think are bad. So just think to yourself, do you believe that conflict is bad? Do you believe that failure is a bad thing?
And do you consider yourself non-confrontational as a person?
You avoid conflict, yeah. If so, I want to invite you to maybe reconsider those thoughts or those beliefs in this podcast. So let's talk about why.
Well, first of all, conflict is something that is essential for storytelling, which I think is interesting.
That's true.
You can't tell a story about anything that's really satisfying without conflict. I had a professor once who I love say, he mentioned the scripture that contention is of the devil. Jesus taught us that contention is of the devil, and therefore conflict might not always be necessary in all films. And he even said, what is the conflict in Kiki's delivery service? I thought that was an interesting example. I personally feel, maybe this is a tangent, but I personally feel that there is conflict in Kiki's delivery service, mm-hmm. although it's a very internal conflict. She's trying to discover who she is, and she finds that she's losing her powers because of this sort of internal identity crisis. But I also think that while contention is of the devil, I don't think that conflict is of the devil. In fact, something my dad has taught me growing up, which I've found in my life at least to be true over and over again, is that avoiding conflict inevitably leads to contention, whereas addressing and embracing a certain degree of conflict and learning what the difference between conflict and contention are actually helps us to avoid contention, which is that fighting, hating, sort of evil part of our human natures that is of the devil, if you catch my drift, that really does everybody harm. It's not productive, but conflict can be productive.
Yeah.
It can be a huge thing when we learn how to calmly and intelligently step in and walk through conflict responsibly like an adult. It can lead to huge growth and huge milestones.
Well, and you're right. Those are the exciting parts of the movie when you're watching a film or engaging with the story. If it was all happily ever after and everything's fine, like that's boring. It's actually exciting to have conflict, and those are usually our favorite parts. It makes me think of La La Land. He says it's conflict, it's compromise. It's very exciting.
It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, talking about jazz. And I've heard this about relationships as well, that when you address conflict, it can actually bring the relationship closer together. It can lead to communication and growth. And the example given in that, I think it was a podcast I was listening to by Dr. Finlayson Fife, who is a sex therapist and also a life coach through the same school that I was certified in. And he talks about how relationships get boring when people get older because they have no more conflict and they already know what the other person likes or doesn't like. And so they kind of just avoid those topics. And then they're just sitting at a restaurant on their phones. There's nothing to talk about. It's just the same old.
Just avoiding conflict. Which does lead to contention.
So when it's a new relationship and there's all this conflict and compromise, that is exciting because you're figuring out, where do we agree? Where do we disagree? How are we going to navigate this?
That's something that Gosling's character says as well in La La Land. He says, it's new. It's new every time. Right? Talking about jazz. It is. It's like a new relationship. Every time you see them, there's something new. There's something expansive, as we like to, that word expansive, something she talks about a lot.
So that's an example of like conflict is exciting. Conflict can be something that we look at as an opportunity or something to lean into.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some maybe less obviously wonderful things as new romance. Oh, that's wonderful. Conflict where it might on the surface or face value appear to be really, really bad or something we want to avoid is when you can sense that a relationship is souring, whether that's on a film set or in a romantic relationship or marriage or with your kids, you can start to feel like, I feel really bad about my relationship with this person, or I really feel angry at this person or resentment toward, or I'm sensing some really hard negative vibes from that person. Whatever reason, you can start to feel that there's something wrong. And that is an opportunity to engage in conflict or avoid it until contention naturally occurs, especially if it's a person you can't avoid. So if it's a person you don't like in that second period class, you can avoid them long enough until you just don't have to be around them anymore.
Graduate.
And that's fine. But what if it's a person that you don't feel like you can avoid it? You see them at work every day. They're in your family. Yeah, they're on set, and you've got to work with them for, maybe a long time, and it's an important project to you, and you don't want to just avoid them. You've got to work with your cinematographer, or your director, or your actor, or your writer, or whatever the thing is. These relationships can sometimes come to these impasses of decisions, and you can either walk into that and openly communicate things, or avoid it until everything hits the fan. And that's when people get fired, I think. I think that's when people get into screaming matches on set. That's when people become depressed and sort of non-functional as human beings. Like they don't feel like they can operate in their roles because they're becoming emotionally, it becomes heavy. And I actually shot a course at BYU when we were working, shot a stress management class when we were student employees doing a lot of their coursework online. And they talked about crucial conversations. And he went through this step-by-step process of sort of being passive, which is avoiding the conflict, aggressive, which is sort of attacking the person you blame for the conflict, or being correct in your communication style, which they taught as this way of saying, here's how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling. I know that's probably not true, but when you do this, this is my thought process. I'm probably wrong, and I need to bring this up with you so that you can help me see this the correct way. That was kind of the way they approached it. And I thought that was a pretty productive way of saying, admitting, like, I'm feeling negative emotion because of my thoughts about this, but I need you to help me see this more correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you have a different perspective. Of course you do. Because who has the perspective? I'm out to get that person today. I'm going to ruin their lives. I just want to be lazy and not do anything. I don't want to work hard today. It's like no one really wakes up thinking that, but we think that about people, right? So you just say, I'm thinking something that's probably wrong, but I'm feeling bad about it, and I need you to help me, was their way of approaching that conflict. And that can be really growing, because when you're open about your feelings and thoughts with someone like that, that builds a lot of trust, I think.
Yeah. In fact, I think I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, that once you start to kind of embrace failure and conflict and all these things, I find myself, and this kind of scares people away sometimes, I think, leaning into it and almost wanting it, because I know when I start to feel afraid, or when I start to feel conflict, I'm still not quite there all the way, but definitely when I start to feel afraid or start to feel some doubt, I'm like, okay, something's going on there. I probably should do it. If I'm feeling afraid, I should probably do that thing, or investigate it and find out what's going on there and how I can grow from that experience. And so, same thing with conflict, when you can start to see it as like, oh, I'm feeling some conflict. This is a chance for me to grow even closer to this person,
or to yourself,
and understand myself better.
Like if
maybe
it's something you're just afraid to do, usually you're afraid to fail. And you're afraid to fail because you're afraid to feel something.
Yeah.
And that same with conflict. We're afraid to engage in conflict because we're probably afraid to fail in that confrontation, if you want to call it that, that communication.
Afraid to feel rejection, afraid to feel, I don't know, disagreement. That's what
sometimes we're afraid of losing relationships, which is another way of fearing failure. You're afraid you're going to fail in that relationship, or that the relationship will fall apart.
When in reality, if you avoid it, then it's choosing to fail.
Inevitable contention, right? Yeah.
Just like you're choosing to fail ahead of time when you don't even try because you're afraid of failing.
Right. And so it's interesting. That's something I've heard tons of filmmakers talk about. You must be willing to fail big, fail early, and fail publicly. And we're learning the value of that right now, I think, in lots of ways. And I think Brian Connolly from Film Right has talked about that. He's talked openly about this big $300,000 short film. It was like a 30-page short film. I'm like, wow, who funds this short film up to that high? And it was this big, high concept, huge thing. And like the day before they were going to shoot, half of their financing fell through. And he had to make calls to actors and crew that were flying into the airport where they are shooting, and telling them this isn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
And he talked about how hard that was. Do we push through this? Do we move forward? Do we just do it with what we have? Do I call it? And he talks about the relief he felt when he had to call it, but at the same time, the embarrassment and that probably did him in for a few days. He probably wasn't really doing anything for a while. It takes time to recover from big failures, but you come out of that with a huge sense of perspective and purpose. And, perspective, that is not to be undervalued. I feel like every movie I make after this one, I'm going to have a new perspective on, like, I am so grateful that I have a gaffer. I'm so grateful that I have an assistant director. Like, I'm so grateful we have a UPM, I'm so grateful we have a little more money than we did last time. I'm grateful this is a little more organized, that I have a script that's a little more polished, or I have a shot list that's a bit more prepared, or a schedule that's a little more organized. I'm going to have perspective because I know what it means to not have those things, because we've done a little bit of that in every regard on this movie, in terms of short on hands, short on money, short on prep, super fast. We threw it together. And so, yeah.
Well, and I think you could rob yourself.
Just the perspective that the failure affords us.
You can rob yourself of that opportunity if you don't own the failure. And I think it's tempting when we fail to fall into shame and start to think something's wrong with us, or to blame. And that's sort of the shame-blame trap, right? We either want to feel shame, or we want to blame other people and push it off of ourselves. But then we miss out on all the learning that's available to us if we do it.
Absolutely. I mean, by not doing it because you're afraid to fail, you've already lost. But then if you actually get the courage to try, and then there's failures, and you start to blame other people, not only are you failing, but you're robbing yourself of what you could be learning and growing and receiving from that failure by blaming other people, or even blaming yourself. I mean, that's what shame really is.
Yeah.
And in some way, and that we do this, it's natural, right? And it's okay. But it's such a huge opportunity to recognize. I'm not going to, recognize and then decide I'm not going to blame this person.
I'm going to embrace the failure all the way.
I'm going to be responsible, embrace the failure, and say, what am I going to do differently next time?
Well, you said be responsible. And I love the word responsible because it's response-able. It's able to respond to a circumstance. And so our responsibility grows as we improve our ability to respond to different situations, and we recognize where we fall short.
But the practice of blaming someone is built on the assumption that we are not able to respond, that we are not able to learn or grow or do anything differently next time because it wasn't our fault. It was the other person's fault. So they have to change. They have to do something.
Well, we're giving away the responsibility.
Exactly.
We're giving away our own ability to respond.
Exactly.
By attributing it to someone else and blaming someone else. So I'm actually reading this parenting book right now that is called Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline, and it's good. I like it.
By Becky A. Bailey. Bailey. Sorry.
But she has a phrase. She says, "Own your upset." She talks about owning that no one else can make you mad. Your kids can't make you mad. And when you own your upset, you're not blaming other people. And she says, when you blame other people for your feelings, you're giving your power away. You are giving them control over your life by saying, this person made me do it, or this wasn't my fault. We give more and more of our power away, and then we start to feel helpless, and we feel like we can't control anything because we've given all the power away. When we own it, you're probably hearing our kids in the background now. But
and we've talked a lot about film sets, but this is like super true with our family relationships, with our marriages. We talked a little bit about romantic relationships. Yesterday, I had this interesting experience with Marshall where he was putting his foot down.
Marshall is our son.
Yeah. And he was putting his foot down in terms of like, he just drew the line at the word please. He asked me for some help, and I just, just said, well, I'd love to help you. What's the word you're forgetting to say? And he's like, I'm not going to say it. I've had enough of this.
He's 5.
I've had enough of this please word that you guys make me say. I'm not going to say it. And I just was like, oh, okay. That's fine, Marshall. You don't have to say it, but I'm not going to help you. And then it turned into this whole thing. And then I had to learn this balance between like, I don't know, it was interesting to just kind of, anyway, I just had to be really patient. It was very difficult, but I managed because this was a good parenting example that I'm giving you of my life. And I won't mention the 10 bad ones that go along with it. But I just kind of taught him, like, you've got 2 choices, and you can walk down the road that leads to cake, which is what he was trying to get, or you can walk down the road that leads to bedtime without it. And the road that leads to cake means you say the word please, I help you cut up your dinner, and then you finish your dinner, and then you get cake. And the road to bedtime is you choose to not say please, and it gets too late, and the sun goes down, and you gotta go to bed.
Yeah.
And he was a little resistant to that, but after a minute, he kind of internalized it, and he, regardless of anything I did, he decided, assessed it, and after kind of being angry for a while, after hearing that, he finally kind of thought about it and decided to walk down the road that he was going to walk down. And he took emotional ownership at that point. And it was interesting to watch it. Marshall actually exercised a lot of emotional intelligence and grow into a degree of emotional adulthood in that moment. And later he literally said, I had to choose the right road to get what I wanted or something. It was very like saying it almost to himself. Yeah, I had to choose the road. Like it was like he was kind of understanding this some principle regarding
just his
agency.
Parents, like something happening to him. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It's a great example of how this can relate to parenting. We can see conflict as an opportunity to teach. We can see it as a sign that our children cannot be held responsible yet for some specific thing. They are not response-able yet. And we can help them be more able to respond by teaching them how to respond to that situation, both through our example and through what we say to them when that comes up. And then I think it's also beautiful that happened yesterday. And we shot yesterday. It was an 8-hour day, 9 to 5. And then we got to come home. We had a delicious, homemade dinner.
Anna made dinner. So she's kind of tooting her own horn. But
you made dessert. You made the lemon bundt cake, which was amazing.
Yeah, courtesy of someone who gifted us a bundt mold. And I was like, oh, I got a bundt cake pan.
Kent is the baker in our family.
Anyway.
And I'm the barbecuer, so we're a little backwards.
It's not backwards.
I mean, it's not traditional.
That was part of the huge victory of yesterday. So going back to our updates on the film, but moving through this huge conflict and failure of this whole movie, there was lots of conflict and lots of failure, and it was all our fault, right? It's fine. A lot of it was, and we learned, and we're taking that forward. And I do feel like yesterday was the closest we've gone to the ideal vision that we have with Film and Family, with Invisible Mansion Pictures, of adjusting this and having time for the family, even on a shoot day, and bringing it into an 8-hour day. And it was
having things flow on set and be, have good relationships, have everyone be healthy, and
put our kids to bed ourselves.
It was not perfect, but you're right. It's the closest we've gotten. And I think we would not have reached that point if we hadn't owned our failures and learned from them, strategized around them.
And then finished the job.
And keep going. And if I just stayed in blame and just blamed everyone else for all the problems, I wouldn't get to learn how to solve them. And so we can say, what am I able to be responsible for? And then take that in and learn from it.
Yeah, and it feels like huge progress. And I think we felt a little bit of a dopamine high from that progress. It was like mile 20 on the marathon. You're like, I'm going to finish this. It's going to happen. I'm close enough that I think I'm going to finish. I'm going to cross the finish line. It wasn't pretty, but I am going to finish. And I'm just so proud of myself for completing it, because you did it.
You did it.
It's anyway, Fred Rogers' digression. And that's the reward of going through the conflict and embracing the failure and not avoiding those things because of the negative emotions that we are afraid to feel. But so, maybe we didn't talk so much about how negative emotions serve us, but maybe just about how negative emotions actually can't hurt us.
There are some negative emotions that are indulgent and not helpful. And there are some negative emotions that are good. And we can limit our happiness when we think that we're supposed to be happy all the time. Viktor Frankl talks about that, specifically about Americans, how we get so unhappy because we don't think we should be sad ever, or we don't own all of our feelings. And this is just an example of a few things that might feel negative. Like we might want to avoid them because we don't want to feel fear, we don't want to feel doubt, we don't want to fail, we don't want conflict.
We don't want to feel shame.
But sometimes that is productive to move forward into those things and learn from them and see what they have to teach you.
Frustration is the one I think I most avoid. I don't want to feel frustration, so I don't want to do something hard. Mm-hmm. But when you do something hard, it's going to be harder than you think it is. As obvious as that sounds, we all know that making features is hard, and yet making it is always harder than you think it's going to be. And you say, I'm going to do this thing, this is how I'm going to do it. And you start walking that road, and then you go, oh my gosh, who put this giant wall on this road? Who dropped the ball on this location? Why can't this actor nail it in this take? Why is, I don't know, the person on the crew or whatever.
I don't even think those are the hardest things that happen on film set.
Maybe
honest,
not, but just why isn't it working? Why isn't it going according to plan? And that is basically the definition of frustrating. At least for me, I'm just speaking for myself. Frustration, I think, sometimes is like, I want to avoid that. I just want a smooth ride, which is why I like that slow is smooth and smooth is fast mantra.
Right.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean there won't be bumps. It doesn't mean there won't be failures. Just get through the failures slowly.
Well, and what you resist persists. So if you're pushing away the conflict, resisting your emotions, all of that stuff, it's going to come back with vengeance. And so it doesn't go away until it came to teach us what it came to teach us. The sooner we open up to it and learn from it, the sooner we can move on, do better things.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like there's a wonderful soundtrack in the background at this point.
I think our kids are ready.
But I feel like really good about the conversation we've had on this podcast, Anna, and I feel good about the things that we were learning. I hope you can take this if you're going through something really difficult and shift your perspective in a way that will help you grow through this, no matter how hard it is. It doesn't make it any easier, but it does make it more worth it. And one day it'll make it so that you can look back and be grateful for how awful and hard whatever that thing was that you went through was. Anyway.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, if you like the podcast, please share with people who it will benefit. Why are you shaking your head?
I'm just laughing at the kids.
Oh, okay.
Their chorus of, I don't know what.
It's film and film. It's our family. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We should do this more often. Yeah. We should invite the kids on.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, we might do that later.
Next time. All right.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next time, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.